Welcome to my channel. Today, I want to share with you a story about quiet heartbreak, emotional dismissal, and the strength it takes to walk away from a love that no longer sees you. It's a story of silence, realization, and the kind of pain that doesn't scream but lingers. Let's dive right into it. They say that when you've been with someone long enough, you start to see the parts of them they don't show to anyone else. The good, the bad, and sometimes the parts you wish you hadn't seen at all. I met Tyler 4 years ago in San Diego, during a mutual friend's birthday party on the beach. He wasn't the loudest guy in the group, not by a long shot. In fact, he barely said anything the whole night. But he had this quiet charm, a calm, collected aura, like nothing in the world could shake him. And in that moment, after a string of whirlwind, overly dramatic relationships, I found his silence comforting. He worked in tech, of course. A software engineer who loved solving logic puzzles and talking about code like it was poetry. I didn't understand half of what he said sometimes, but I liked listening. There was something strangely soothing about the way he explained things. Slowly, with thought, never rushing. And when he looked at me, it wasn't like how the others did. There was no judgment, no hunger, just curiosity. We started dating shortly after that night. I was 25, still working part-time while trying to finish my degree in graphic design. Tyler, 2 years older, already had his life seemingly in order. Stable job, quiet apartment, a weekly gym routine, and a closet full of black t-shirts. He was predictable, steady, a rock. At first, it felt like exactly what I needed. But rocks, by definition, don't move. And over time, I started to realize neither did he. The first year passed in that giddy haze of new love. We binged Netflix shows, cooked new recipes, and even went on a road trip up the Pacific Coast Highway. He didn't talk much, but when he did, it felt meaningful. I learned to read his silences, or so I thought. But by year 2, I started to notice little cracks. Tyler had this habit of shutting down emotionally whenever things got uncomfortable. If I cried after a bad day at work, he'd sit silently, offering me a glass of water but no words. If I wanted to talk about our future, he'd change the subject. If I got upset about something he said or did, he'd say nothing at all. At first, I told myself it was just his way. He's an introvert. I'd say he processes things differently. And besides, nobody's perfect, right? But lately, those silences started to feel less like patience and more like walls. I remember the night it all started to unravel. It was a Friday. We were supposed to go out with some friends for dinner, but Tyler canceled last minute, saying he was too tired from work. I understood. He'd been pulling long hours on some big project, but when I came over to his place, hoping to just spend a quiet night together, he barely acknowledged me. He kept typing away on his laptop, earbuds in, nodding occasionally but not really engaging. I sat on his couch, scrolling through my phone, trying not to feel invisible. But I did. After an hour, I finally said, "T, can we talk?" He looked up, one earbud still in. "Yeah, I feel like you've been distant lately. And I know work's been crazy, but it's like I'm not even here when I'm with you." He stared at me for a moment, and then said it. So casually, so flat. "Are you on your period or something?" My heart dropped. I blinked. "What?" He shrugged, as if he hadn't just gut-punched me with 5 stupid syllables. "You just seem emotional?" I could feel the sting in my eyes immediately. But it wasn't just from what he said. It was from everything that came before it. All the times he refused to meet me emotionally. All the times I begged for connection and got a wall. And now, when I finally tried to speak up, he dismissed me like I was some walking hormone. I stood up without a word and grabbed my bag. "Ava," he said, finally closing his laptop. I didn't mean it like that, but I was already at the door. "I don't want to talk if you're just gonna blow up," he added, like it was me who'd thrown the match. That night, I drove back to my place in silence, the city lights blurring through my windshield as the tears finally came. And for the first time in 4 years, I asked myself a question I never thought I would. Was this love, or was it just habit? because suddenly, it didn't feel like I was in a relationship. It felt like I was begging to be seen. The next morning, I woke up in my own bed, fully dressed, makeup smeared, and heart aching. I stared at the ceiling for a long time before I finally rolled over and checked my phone. No texts, no missed calls, just a single message from my best friend, Lana, sent around midnight. "You okay? You left the group chat early." I didn't reply. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't okay. But I wasn't sure if I was overreacting either. That was the worst part. It's not like he hit me. He didn't scream. He didn't cheat. He just minimized me, dismissed me. Again. But wasn't that worse? In a way, I spent the weekend in a haze. I went through the motions, brushed my teeth, fed my cat, watered my plants, but my mind kept replaying that moment. That flat look on his face when he said, "Are you on your period or something?" Like my emotions couldn't possibly be valid unless they were hormone-fueled. By Sunday night, I finally called Lana. I needed to talk to someone who actually cared to listen. She picked up on the first ring. "Girl, I was starting to think you died." I let out a half-hearted laugh. "Not dead. Just trying to figure out what the hell I'm doing." "Is this about Tyler?" she asked instantly, tone shifting to concern. Yeah, I told her everything. From the canceled dinner to the cold response to that sentence. She didn't interrupt. Just listened. That alone made me tear up. When I finished, she was quiet for a second, then asked softly, "Ava, do you think you're happy?" The question punched harder than I expected. "I don't know," I admitted. "I used to be, but now, I feel like I'm constantly trying to justify my own feelings. Like I have to prove I'm not being too sensitive just to have a normal conversation with him." Lana sighed. "That's not what love should feel like." I didn't sleep much that night. Tyler finally texted me around 11 p.m. "Tyler, hey, sorry for how I handled things Friday. Can we talk this week?" No mention of what he said. No accountability. Just a blanket apology and a half-hearted olive branch. I didn't reply right away. I needed space. I needed clarity. So the next few days, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I focused on myself. I went to work, came home, drew in my sketchbook, and tried to reconnect with the version of me that existed before this relationship started swallowing her whole. And in those quiet moments, I realized something that chilled me. I had changed. Not in the way couples evolve together, but in the way someone slowly molds themselves to fit into the shrinking spaces their partner leaves for them. I used to be vibrant, opinionated. I used to cry during sad movies and rant about politics and dance in the kitchen while making pancakes. Now I measured my words. I held back tears. I tiptoed. When did I become afraid of expressing myself around the person who was supposed to love me the most? I agreed to meet Tyler on Wednesday. Neutral ground. A coffee shop we used to frequent during our first year together. He was already there when I arrived, sitting with his usual iced Americano, scrolling through his phone like nothing had happened. I sat down across from him, and for a moment, we just looked at each other. He offered a small smile. Hey, I said back, but my voice sounded unfamiliar to my own ears. He started with the usual small talk, how work was, how his team finally shipped the product. I nodded, smiled politely, but didn't engage. Finally, he set down his cup and leaned forward. "Listen, about last Friday, I shouldn't have said that. It was a stupid joke." "It wasn't a joke," I said quietly. "You said it because you didn't want to actually talk to me." He blinked. "That's not true." "Yes, it is," I said, louder this time. "You always do this. You shut down. You make me feel like I'm too much. Too emotional, too intense, too sensitive. And I've let it slide for years because I thought maybe that's just who you are. But now I'm starting to wonder if maybe I've been making excuses for you this whole time." His mouth opened, then closed again. He looked genuinely caught off guard. "I love you," he said finally. "You know that." "Right." I nodded. "I know, but love isn't always enough." He shook his head. "So what? You want to break up over one comment?" "No," I said. "I want to break up because one comment made me realize how often I've silenced myself for your comfort. The silence between us was thick. "I didn't know you felt that way," he muttered. "That's the problem," I said. "You never ask." We sat there for a while longer. He tried to explain himself, how he struggled with emotions, how he thought he was giving me space, how he didn't want to fight. But none of it mattered anymore, because I finally understood something. Being with someone who doesn't hurt you isn't the same as being with someone who heals you. And I was tired of bleeding in silence. I stood up, heart heavy but mind clear. "Take care of yourself, Tyler." He didn't say anything as I walked away. This time, I didn't cry. The night after I ended things with Tyler, I sat on my balcony with a blanket wrapped around me, watching the city breathe beneath a quiet sky. The hum of distant traffic, the flicker of streetlights, the occasional bark of a dog, all felt oddly comforting, familiar, but not suffocating. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of someone else's silence lift from my shoulders. But it wasn't peace. Not yet. It was loneliness. Raw and bare. When you walk away from a long relationship, you don't just lose a person, you lose routines, the inside jokes, the automatic texts when you get home safe, the comfort of knowing someone's out there with your name saved in their favorites. And even when the relationship was hurting you, those pieces, they still hurt to let go. I found myself reaching for my phone more times than I care to admit. Not to message him, but just to look, to see if maybe he reached out, to see if I mattered enough to fight for. But Tyler didn't fight. He respected my decision, like a checkbox on a to-do list. And that stung more than anything else. A few days later, Lana showed up at my apartment uninvited, holding 2 large boba teas and a look that meant business. "You're not allowed to spiral alone," she declared, pushing her way inside. "We're watching trash TV and judging strangers tonight." I laughed, genuinely, for the first time in days. "You're too good to me." "Damn right I am," she said, settling onto the couch. "But also, I'm not letting you sit here marinating in sadness. You did the hard thing. You chose yourself. That's worth celebrating." We ended up watching some ridiculous dating show where people got engaged without ever seeing each other's faces. Lana made snarky commentary through every episode while I curled up next to her, sipping my drink and letting her voice fill the quiet spaces in my heart. But later that night, when I was alone again, the ache returned. I opened an old folder on my laptop labeled Ty and Ava. It was filled with photos, screenshots, and random little notes we'd left for each other over the years. There was one picture of us from a trip to Lake Tahoe, bundled in winter coats, cheeks red from the cold. We looked happy. He had his arm around me, and I remember thinking in that moment that I could spend the rest of my life beside him. And yet, even then, I remember feeling a little empty. I closed the folder and stared at the black screen, my reflection staring back at me, eyes tired. Why do we stay with people who don't meet us halfway? Is it hope, fear, or just the exhausting thought of starting over? I started going to therapy the next week. It wasn't a dramatic moment. No breakdown. No sobbing confession. Just a quiet email to a local therapist whose website said she specialized in emotional validation and self-worth. Her name was Dana, middle-aged, warm smile, soft-spoken voice. She didn't judge, didn't rush. She just listened. In our first session, I told her about Tyler, about the silence, the dismissal, the 4 years of shrinking myself into someone smaller so I wouldn't be too much for him. And when I finished, she said, "You know, it sounds like you learned how to survive in that relationship, but not how to thrive." That sentence sat with me for days. I started journaling again, writing down memories, moments I had brushed off but that now made my stomach twist. Like the time I got promoted at work and he barely reacted, or the time I cried during a documentary and he told me to grow thicker skin, or the way he never introduced me as his girlfriend, just Ava, until I brought it up. Little things, but when stacked together, they painted a picture I'd refused to look at. Not because I didn't see it, but because I was afraid of what it would mean if I admitted it was real. One afternoon, while cleaning out my closet, I found an old sketchbook I hadn't touched in over a year. The pages were filled with drawings, some messy, some delicate, all unmistakably mine. Flipping through it felt like meeting an old friend, Someone vibrant, expressive, emotional, unfiltered. Someone I had buried under 4 years of compromise. I picked up a pencil and started sketching again. No plan, no structure, just movement. And with each line, each shadow, I felt more like myself than I had in a long time. I didn't miss Tyler that night. I missed who I used to be. Spring crept into the city quietly. Subtle changes like longer sunsets, breezes that no longer bit, and trees beginning to bloom along the sidewalks. And in some strange way, my life started to reflect that same slow thaw. It wasn't dramatic. There was no sudden moment of, I'm healed. But little by little, I noticed things shifting inside me. I laughed more, not because something was funny, but because I wasn't holding my breath anymore. I started eating breakfast on my tiny apartment balcony, letting the sun warm my face. I listened to music again, the kind Tyler used to roll his eyes at because it was too loud, too emotional, too much. I danced in my kitchen while making coffee, wearing socks with mismatched patterns and hair that hadn't seen a brush in days. And I felt good. Not perfect, not whole, but better. Lana, of course, noticed. She came over one Saturday with her usual chaotic energy, armed with snacks and unsolicited updates on every dating app in existence. You should get back out there, she said, flopping onto my couch and tossing me a gummy bear. I raised an eyebrow. You're suggesting I date someone who doesn't know how to unmatch people with mullets. Exactly, she grinned. Low bar, but it's a start. I laughed, but shook my head. I'm not ready. I need to be okay with myself first. She softened. You're getting there. Just don't forget. You deserve someone who doesn't make you beg to be heard. That night, I journaled again, but this time, instead of writing about the past, I wrote about the future, not the fantasy kind. No wedding visions, no mysterious strangers sweeping me off my feet. Just simple things. I wrote about wanting to feel safe, to be loved in the way I love, to have hard conversations without fear, to be held when I'm soft, not mocked for it. And that's when it hit me. Tyler didn't break me. He just stopped me from blooming. And now, I was blooming anyway. A few weeks later, I ran into him. It was in the grocery store. Of all places, aisle 6, right by the cereal boxes. He looked the same. Gray hoodie, AirPods in, that same distracted look in his eyes. He didn't see me at first. I stood frozen for a moment, unsure if I wanted to turn around and pretend I never saw him. But then he looked up. Our eyes met. There was a flicker of something. Recognition, surprise, maybe a hint of regret. He took one earbud out. Hey, I said, carefully neutral. He glanced down at my basket. Still addicted to honey oat granola. I see. I smiled faintly. Some things never change. There was a pause. Not uncomfortable, just full of unspoken things. You look good, he said quietly. Thanks. Another pause. I've been meaning to reach out, he said. I just didn't know what to say. I nodded. That's okay. You don't have to. He seemed to search for something else to add, then stopped. Anyway, I hope you're doing all right. I am, I said, and it was the truth. We said goodbye. No awkward hugs. No long stares. Just two people who once loved each other in the only way they knew how. One of them, learning too late. The other just in time. When I got home, I didn't cry. I didn't overanalyze what he said, or didn't say. I didn't reread old texts or check his socials. Instead, I curled up on my couch with a blanket, a warm mug of tea, and a sketch pad. I started drawing again. No pressure, no rules, just shapes, colors, stories flowing from my fingers. And as I filled the page, I felt it, that quiet hum inside me. The one that said, "You're okay. You made it out. You're still here." A few months passed. The ache of the breakup had faded into something more distant, like a song I used to know the lyrics to but couldn't quite hum anymore. It still existed in pieces, certain songs, certain places, but it didn't sting the way it used to. It was just part of my story now. And in its place, something unexpected had begun to grow. Peace. Not the kind you earn from fixing things, the kind that comes from accepting that some things don't need to be fixed at all. They just need to be left behind. I had changed my routine entirely. Woke up earlier, took weekend trips by myself, started selling prints of my artwork online. I even signed up for a ceramics class Lana recommended. Though mostly, she just wanted an excuse to flirt with the instructor. It was during one of those classes, as I sat shaping a clumsy bowl that looked more like a crooked ashtray, that I met someone new. His name was Eli. He had curly brown hair, wore glasses that were always slightly smudged, and laughed with his whole face. He wasn't conventionally striking, but there was something magnetic about him. Maybe it was the way he noticed people, not stared, not sized them up, but saw them. We sat next to each other, and he joked about my modern art disaster of a bowl. I rolled my eyes and told him his vase looked like a mutant carrot. It wasn't love at first sight. It was comfort at first moment. Over the next few weeks, we became class buddies, shared stories, complained about the stubborn clay, argued over the best place to get Thai food. He never asked for my number, never pushed for anything. And maybe that's why, one evening, after class, I offered it myself. We started texting, then meeting for coffee, then walks along the beach. There was no pressure, no games, just two people learning each other at a slow, intentional pace. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of being too much. One night, I found myself telling Eli about Tyler. Not the whole dramatic saga, just pieces. How I had once loved someone who never really saw me, and how I had stayed quiet for too long. Eli listened without flinching. He didn't try to fix it. He didn't say men are trash or you deserve better. He just said, "I'm really glad you found your way back to you." And I think that was the moment I knew, not that I was falling for him, but that I was finally capable of loving without losing myself. Because that's what healing does. It doesn't erase the pain. It just teaches you how to hold it differently. I still had moments of doubt. Of course I did. Healing isn't linear. Some days, I still miss the familiarity of my old life. I missed knowing what came next. I missed the illusion of certainty, but I didn't miss the silence. I didn't miss apologizing for my emotions. I didn't miss the way I used to wonder if I mattered. Eli saw me, my mess, my joy, my sadness, my strength. He welcomed it all. And in return, I learned to do the same for myself. One Saturday afternoon, I invited him to my apartment for the first time. We painted together. Nothing fancy. Just smudgy, colorful messes on cheap canvases. He looked at my work and said, "You paint like someone who feels everything." I laughed. "That used to be a bad thing." "Then the world's been wrong," he replied. Later, as we sat on the floor eating takeout, music playing low in the background, I looked over at him. "I don't know what this is yet," I said honestly, "and I'm not in a rush to define it." He nodded. "Me neither. But I do know this," I added. "I feel safe with you, and I don't feel small." Eli reached over, brushing a bit of paint off my cheek. "Good, because you were never meant to be small." 6 months after the breakup, I returned to Lake Tahoe, not for nostalgia, not to relive old memories, but to make new ones. I rented a small cabin on the edge of the lake, quiet, simple, surrounded by trees whispering their autumn secrets. The air was crisp, scented with pine and change. I came alone. That fact felt powerful in itself. I hiked during the day, bundled in layers, cheeks red and nose runny, but heart light at night. I curled up by the fireplace with tea and a sketch pad, letting the crackle of burning wood replace the silence I used to fear. One evening, as the sky turned cotton candy pink, I took a walk down to the water, the same path Tyler and I had walked all those years ago. I remembered how I had clung to his hand, imagining a future that now felt like fiction, but as I stood there alone, hands tucked into my coat, I didn't feel sad. I felt proud, because that girl, the one who clung so tightly, she had grown. She had learned that love shouldn't feel like begging. That presence isn't the same as partnership. That peace isn't silence. It's being understood, even in chaos. I watched the lake shimmer under the fading light and whispered a quiet, "Thank you," not to Tyler, but to myself, for leaving, for staying gone, for not going back when it would have been easy, familiar, safe. I thought about Eli. about how he made space for me, about how he never tried to define or fix or own me. He was still in my life, slowly, steadily. But this moment wasn't about him either. It was about me. It was about the woman I had become through the heartbreak. The kind of woman who doesn't settle for half love, who doesn't minimize herself to avoid making someone else uncomfortable. The kind of woman who knows that being sensitive isn't weakness, it's strength, dressed in honesty. On the last day of my trip, I wrote a letter, not to send, just to let go. Dear Ava, you loved hard. You gave deeply. You tried, even when it hurt. That's not weakness. That's courage. You didn't fail because it ended. You succeeded because you found your way back to yourself. From now on, you don't have to shrink to be loved. You don't have to be quiet to keep the peace. You are allowed to feel, to speak, to take up space. You are allowed to be whole. Keep going. Keep growing. Love. Me. When I returned to the city, life resumed as it always does. Emails, errands, everyday chaos. But I moved through it differently now. More grounded. More sure. More me. I kept sketching. I kept dancing in my kitchen. I kept talking to Lana for hours about everything and nothing. I kept seeing Eli, though we never labeled it. We didn't need to, he once told me. Labels are containers. I'd rather be something that grows. I liked that. One afternoon, we sat on a bench watching kids chase pigeons in the park. He looked over at me, brow furrowed. You know what I admire about you? I blinked. What? You have this quiet strength, like you've walked through something really hard. And instead of letting it harden you, you let it make you softer. I didn't know what to say, so I just smiled. Because maybe that's what healing really is. Not the absence of pain, but the ability to carry it without letting it weigh you down. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know where Eli and I will go, or if someday we'll drift apart like tides pulling in different directions. But I do know this. Whatever comes next, I will not lose myself again. Not for anyone, because I have learned how to love myself louder than the silence I once accepted. And that is everything. Thanks for tuning in to Reddit Stories. New tales drop daily drama, love, or ghostly glories. Hit like, subscribe, and ring that bell so you won't miss the next story we tell. Got thoughts to share? Drop them below. We read them all just so you know.